said she was arriving. Oh, but she can start. Big panel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Ukraine Pavilion at COP30. I hope you can all hear me okay on your headphones. My name is Daisy Dunn. I'm the Associate Editor at Carbon Brief, which is a climate publication, and I'm very happy to moderate this panel where today we are launching a major piece of work for Ukraine and the global carbon governance picture, which is a new framework called Enabling and Ensuring a Paris-Aligned Carbon Market for Ukraine. The framework has been developed by a team of leading experts and institutions, including Oxford Net Zero, the Smith School of Enterprise and the Environment, with contributions spanning climate law, carbon market design, green reconstruction, and Paris Agreement cooperation. Our lead authors, Kaya Axelson, Ingi Johnston, Yevgenia Kopitstra, and collaborators, including Sean Cucci and Ben Gupta, have produced a comprehensive framework for a net zero aligned carbon market published by an emerging economy. This is a big moment for Ukraine. Ukraine is attempting something the world has not seen before, designing a high integrity carbon market in the middle of an active war, while pursuing one of the most ambitious green reconstruction agendas in modern European history. Thank you. This document is not just a roadmap. It is a practical governance blueprint that brings together ETS design, voluntary market rules, Article 6 cooperation, safeguard systems, digital infrastructure, and lessons from global best practice. So I'm delighted to be joined by a very esteemed panel today. We are joined by Kaya Axelson from Oxford Net Zero at the University of Oxford, Ingi Johnson, also from Oxford Net Zero at the University of Oxford, Michael Krill Mafras, co-founder and CMO of ITMO Limited, Vladislav Maleshki, analyst and project manager at IRS LLC, and Dr. Evgenia Kopitstra, the Yaroslav Mudry National Law University and Oxford Net Zero. Thank you all here for being at the launch and for participating in this panel today. So Kaya, I'm going to turn to you first. Yes, so Kaya, you've been central to shaping the global debate on net zero aligned carbon markets and responsible Article 6 cooperation. Can you start by setting the scene? So how was the framework developed? What principles guided the author's work, and why is it so important at this moment in Ukraine's history to build a Paris-aligned, net zero aligned carbon market?
Thank you so much, Daisy, and to Carbon Brief for hosting us today. Thank you, Evgenia, and to the Ukraine government for your support and for this pavilion. I just can't believe the incredible expression of resilience that is Ukraine year after year at COP. And I love Evgenia's comment of Ukraine, from Ukraine, that net zero is peace. And the synergies between defense, security, and a transition to decentralized, people-powered, renewable energy, and the way that nature protects us, not just through the way it kind of heals our lungs, but also through the landscape and the territory. These synergies are something that I think governments are particularly attuned to right now, and Ukraine leading the way on this, I think has knock-on effects and spillover effects for the way we talk about renewable energy and nature and its many functions, in addition to being powerful in itself all over the world. So apart from a high integrity carbon market for Ukraine, we wanted to produce this report as an example for other parts of the world. And let's be honest, with the rising conflict and rising insecurity, we are going to have to be creating governance systems that are robust in conflict zones all around the world. This is not something I'm afraid that we can avoid or get away from. And yet, doing so and over-promising with those carbon markets comes with a lot of risk, because you don't want to tell people the money is coming. Well, you can use this as an offset anytime you want, and and we'll just get big companies to spend on offsets, and then the money dries up if policy changes. So that last thing we want is more insecurity and more false promises for the people of Ukraine. So we wrote a framework that really actually we didn't have to originate a lot of work, because there's amazing work in this ecosystem. Ingi Johnston being the lead author of the principles out of Oxford for aligning with a net zero, Paris aligned, credible engagement with Article 6. We drew, of course, on the Oxford offsetting principles for what it means to have a net zero aligned offset. And I think the main caution, and we also drew on a paper called Carbon at Risk by Thinking Removals, and we drew on the principles for a responsible policy on carbon markets, for growing carbon markets, that the VCMI is putting forward. So there's a coalition. So there's really actually 4 really good pieces of work that, as you said, have been integrated into this framework that link the voluntary with the mandatory system. And I would say my main caution or headline out of this paper is we need to be following those safeguards and those basic principles as we develop the carbon market. We can't be relying for Ukraine on the carbon market as a single source of funding. We need defense money to be going into renewables as well. And we have a real opportunity to stimulate an economy with projects that have co-benefits for the people of Ukraine, and not just the carbon benefits. And I think that is a principle at the core of any good carbon market project, but particularly this one. So if you have a chance to check out the briefing, it's a briefing. It's very brief. It's for government leaders who don't have a lot of time. You can see the integration of all of those principles and frameworks, and I'm sure we'll get into that more.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, could you talk a bit more about the net zero aligned part of the framework?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on who's claiming. Talking about Ukraine's path to net zero, then a thriving carbon market is just an integral part of its financing. But if we're talking about the claims that companies might be making off the back of a purchase, then we have put in place some safeguards or some principles, because the last thing we want is for a company to buy something thinking it's a durable offset, and then because there's a high risk zone, that removal gets canceled in some way, and then that's not a reliable offset, and then they pull out of Ukraine. So the first kind of caution is for companies who are thinking about investing in the voluntary carbon market in Ukraine, think about this as a contribution on the path to net zero. Both the Science Based Targets Initiative and the International Standard Organization have put out or are developing new guidelines that have as a best practice and a leaderboard, companies would be contributing a portion of their emissions times the carbon price into a fund, and stating this as a contribution, and you can compare who's contributing more to global net zero. That's the framing that seems to be working well to avoid lawsuits about overclaiming net zero based on credits, especially in high risk zones.
Thank you. So turning to Ingi Johnston now. Ingi, much of your work focuses on the principles for responsible Article 6 engagement. From your perspective, what are the most important government elements Ukraine must get right early to ensure its carbon market is Paris aligned and internationally trusted?
Wonderful. Thank you, Daisy. And I'd just like to acknowledge, my colleague Badisa, we've been working on Article 6 now for 5 years together. And so really, it's a privilege to be joined together on this project today. But really with the principles for responsible engagement, again, it actually starts with demand, because without demand, there's actually no carbon market. And so principle 1 speaks to that, but principle 2 speaks to supply integrity. And there's a number of different dimensions as to supply integrity. Obviously, we know they're very familiar across a number of different frameworks, such as additionality and baselines, ensuring against leakage, ensuring safeguards for local communities. And there's a number of them. We released the principles back in June at Bonn. And so, would encourage people to go and access that. And actually, as part of that, we really break down the role for host countries as well as buyer countries. And what's really interesting and what we dived into in the framework is that Ukraine is initially positioned as a host country, but actually also at some point will be a buyer country in terms of EU accession. And so that's what's really interesting in terms of designing a robust regulatory framework, is having both the near-term reality in step, but also that longer-term vision, and ensuring that any kind of market framework is resilient to both. And so as part of that, we also tied back to this framework we released last month, which is a roadmap to net zero aligned carbon market regulation. And that really seeks to tie together the voluntary market regulation with the compliance regulation with this new emerging Article 6 forms of carbon cooperation, because really we're starting to see an unprecedented linkage of these different systems. And so that's why the supply standards really do matter, because if you're trying to build a resilient market, you have to ensure that that is fungible with these other components in order to ensure that longevity of that. But the third aspect, which is really critical, and we can get into a bit more detail of, is there's also a number of very crucial reporting elements that are necessary in order to provide a legitimate internationally traded mitigation outcome under Article 6. And we can dive into some of that detail a little bit later, but those are really three critical pieces. So we need durable and responsible demand, we need high quality supply, and we need to ensure the transparency and rigor of the reporting framework, especially for the kind of more compensation-based units, which are the Article 6.4 ERs and ITMOs, compared to the mitigation contribution units, which are also an avenue under the Paris Agreement. Thanks.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, how can Ukraine ensure that carbon market revenues support communities, SMEs, and veterans, and become part of a predictable, trust-building green recovery for Ukraine?
What's interesting, as part of some of the emerging regulatory frameworks, we actually see stipulations relating to specific percentages that need to go back to the community. But we're also seeing a greater expectation on the part of buyers for more transparency, particularly as it relates to intermediaries, because oftentimes there's been a long legacy in the carbon market of not really knowing where that revenue is going. And actually, a study that's coming out, for instance, in Africa, nearly 80% of the profits have actually still flowed from to the global north through transactions. And so we're starting to see understanding about that being an issue, and starting to see more prescription around what levels need to go back to the community. But it's also exciting because under the 6.4 Paris Agreement crediting mechanism, we also have the first grievance mechanism available to communities. And so it's not only about ensuring there's a prescription, but there's also an avenue to ensure that that can be respected. But we also need to see that reflected in domestic legislation as well, to ensure that those benefits are respected.
Thank you. Turning to Michael now. Michael is one of the sector's leading innovators on methodology development, biodiversity finance, and sovereign carbon approaches. Michael, how can Ukraine integrate biodiversity-linked methodologies and sovereign carbon thinking into its emerging carbon market architecture to ensure integrity and attract high-quality investment?
Yes, that's a very complex question, but let me just take a step back, if I may. My name is Michael Kryl Mathras. Kryl is my Ukrainian name. Mathras is my Cambodian name, so I'm half Ukrainian. And I've been negotiating, part of the negotiations at the COP for the last 16 years. And I've been part of the Article 6 negotiations when they were signed, both at the Paris Agreement in 2015 and also in Glasgow at COP26. And since COP26, we've been working with many countries, more than 20 countries, to implement Article 6. So I'm the co-founder of ITMO Limited. I think I'm the only person here that's part of the private sector. So I'm from the private sector, and I deal with the carbon markets and the capital markets. And so for the last 5 years, we implemented Article 6 with a number of countries. And last week, there was a big announcement made with regards to the first Article 6 credits that were being issued by the Republic of Honduras and Republic of Suriname. And that's the deal that we've been working on for the last 5 years. And this has been done with the support of Deutsche Bank. So a large global bank is involved, and 3 large corporations, Siemens, Bayer, and Symrise. And all these companies and all this bank are trying to make this Article 6 market real, not just theoretical or academic. And so going back to we've learned a lot from our experiences with those countries. And to implement Article 6 within Ukraine, a lot of things need to be put in place. First is the NDC, which fortunately was released last week, I think. So congratulations to Ukraine for submitting your NDC. It is on the UNFCCC website. That's step number one. Step number two is to really analyze this NDC and figure out what in this NDC we can help with regards to each sector. It could be energy, it could be transportation, it could be nature. And then you have to put national systems into place, which relates to your questions. So to make sure that you are fulfilling all the elements that the Article 6 requires, you need to implement a national MRV system, national safeguard system. And within the national safeguard system, this is where you answer a lot of those co-benefits, which include biodiversity, SDGs, so these are the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, the local communities and the indigenous people, which is extremely, extremely sad because I was talking to a Crimean Tatar girl actually, last week, and she told me about the whole destruction of Crimea's nature and biodiversity. And this is where we need to provide, all the help we can for Crimea and for the whole of Ukraine, because it's all those local, I'd say tribes because there's no tribes in Ukraine, but it's all these local people that are managing Ukraine's nature and Ukraine's trees and forests and mountains. And if you put the right national systems into place and you have the right policy from, of course, the Ukrainian government, then you're able to provide that money as part of the use of proceeds. I'm just going to make a number up, but let's just say 10% goes to the local communities in Ukraine. Then 10% of the money from Article 6 will go to those local communities. So once again, we have to implement all these systems into place. We've done it with many countries, and I'm ready to do it for Ukraine. All the systems sit on my computer here, and it has the Ukrainian flag on, well, not flag, but coat of arms on it. So I'm just ready to implement all of this with the Ukrainian government, and of course with all the investors and corporates that want to reconstruct and invest in the green recovery of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. A follow-up question. I think you've touched on it briefly, but what lessons from developing new methodologies such as livestock emissions or sovereign carbon could help Ukraine design credible methodologies for agriculture ecosystems and nature restoration in conflict-affected regions?
Yes. So another complicated question, but I take one step back as well. So under Article 6, there's two articles that are important to understand. It's Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. Under Article 6.2, this is at national level. So it's basically any national implemented programs, both at the nature level or at sectoral level within the economy. And then there's Article 6.4, which is relating to projects. So if you wanted to start a project, you would need to submit an A64 methodology to the UNFCCC, and then of course it needs to be accepted by the UNFCCC, and then you can start a A64 project within Ukraine. With regards to A64, this was only really, agreed to last year. So there's only one methodology that's been submitted and accepted, not submitted, but accepted under the UNFCCC review process. However, I've submitted a livestock methodology a month ago based on VM0041, which is relating to helping reduce methane emissions from livestock. And so I think that hopefully this methodology will be accepted, and we can use part of that methodology to start projects in Ukraine with regards to helping develop the livestock and agricultural sector in Ukraine in a sustainable way. But just to let you know that it is a complicated process, because when you submit a 864 methodology, it takes up to 6 months for you to receive an answer to see whether it's been accepted or not. So I won't expect this methodology to be implemented in the next 6 months. There will be more methodologies apart from ours that I've written. So I'm looking forward to all the methodologies that are accepted both here at the COP and also in Bonn during the pre-COP 31 in 7 months' time.
Thank you. Turning to Vladislav now. So Vladislav brings a rare combination of Article 6 expertise, reconstruction planning, and data science analysis, along with direct experience supporting Ukraine's local recovery process. So Vladislav, what do you see as the most realistic, high-integrity pathways for developing carbon projects in high-risk or war-affected regions of Ukraine?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for inviting me to the panel and for the great speakers before me. So I will probably take a small step back as well. So when we are talking about Ukraine's recovery, right, we are talking about people that has demonstrated over the last years a lot of ability to innovate and find new solutions to different problems. So we have seen that even though the war is still ongoing in Ukraine, there is already a lot of discussion about post-war reconstruction. And in our opinion, it must be so, because you want, a reconstruction that is sustainable. You don't want to come back to a business as usual scenario and then to have to do all the effort also for a potential transition. And among the different solutions that we can find, of course, we have also carbon markets. And in particular, I'll focus on Article 6 because that's what I've been following for some time now. And I think that at the moment, if we have to think about war-impacted areas or the one closest to the front line, etc., we actually need, first of all, to have a framework that works at the national level. So what we need now, not in 3 years' time, not in 10 years' time, is for the Ukrainian government to decide, like, specifically how they want to use Article 6, for example, and in general carbon markets. We have seen that under the NDC there is clear intention of using the mechanism in the next years. So the NDC opens the door for its usage, but at the same time we want responsible usage of Article 6 because we don't want to flood Ukraine with carbon credits that don't actually have merit to exist. So what we need now is, first of all, a clearance in terms of policy. So in policies, we need to bring down Article 6 from the UNFCCC national Ukrainian level to understand how it will be implemented. The implementation goes through political decisions, so policies that set a clear path forward, but at the same time, we need clearance in terms of infrastructure. So we need the infrastructure to be developed in Ukraine. Sorry, can you hear me? Because, okay. We need the infrastructure to be developed, or at least clearance on, for example, how the registries will work, how the interoperability will work. There is a lot of also open discussion in terms of the integration with the ETS. Well, we've been talking about this just moments before this panel. So Ukraine is preparing to have its ETS, and it's important to understand the interoperability between Article 6, the ETS, so the national and international systems, and these will then directly affect how these will be implemented in buffer zones or zones that are closer to the front line. So of course we expect, and I mean We've seen this through the last few years when we were talking about reconstruction, and we expect this to continue in this way, for local communities to be involved, because at the end, Ukraine is big, and even before the war, we have like different areas with different characteristics, and now even more, because the war has very much differentiated some territories inside in Ukraine. So the reconstruction and the build back better has to come also through the involvement of local communities, because they are the ones that will be implementing those projects. They are the ones that have to gain the most of the benefits. So we really much appreciate the help that has come for Ukraine from our international partners, but at the same time, we really need to get the Ukraine back on track of development and reconstruction, so that for Ukrainians to strive. I think I'll stop here, because I guess, I mean, considering the path, there is a follow-up, but I'll go more in the details.
Thank you. Yes. So my follow-up is, how can quantitative risk sources, dynamic buffer pools, and data-driven monitoring help Ukraine manage reversal and security risks while still enabling affected communities to benefit from market participation?
Yeah, thank you. So I will start from the last point. So the one regarding how digital, digital risk management can help. It's important to set correctly the registries and the digital infrastructure, so that it will be easier later to also have risk management practices in place. It's very important. We know that, I mean, there has been discussion for 10 years on how to avoid, reversals and leakages and so on and so forth. So the very first point is to have clear, digital infrastructure, which is open, accessible. Of course, there are sensitive data. I mean, this is understandable, but at the same time, there should be a clear way to pull information from the registries, so that anyone, civil society included, international observers, etc., can access this at least aggregated information to understand what's actually going on the ground. Ideally, with clear understanding of the localization of these projects, the amount of units implicated, and what are the different practices put in place. We don't want to see, I mean, under the UNFCCC, for the moment, we have these temporary registries and all these mechanisms that should be temporary, which make it very difficult for observers to understand what is going on with the projects. We have to have teams of researchers, and thankfully we have Oxford Net Zero. There are others that need to work basically 365 days per year to get the information out of these projects and understand what's going on. That shouldn't be the case. We should have a way to easily pull information and make it verifiable. So that's the first point. Then secondly, going to the more closer to the risk management point, there is also, I expect, that's of course personal opinions, but I expect that it takes time to implement this kind of project. So we can't expect to have dozens or hundreds or thousands of projects immediately. Also because probably if there were so many projects, they would lack a lot of quality. So we can expect to have a smaller amount of projects. And in this case, especially for a country as Ukraine that is going currently through a war, it's difficult to have historical data or historical analysis on what are the scenarios. But of course, modeling can be done, and we've seen on previous days on some other panels that our researchers are. I mean, they are very great. They did a lot of research in terms of war-related emissions, and they didn't use just historical analysis, but also the other spatial analysis, etc., to understand how to correlate information. So there can be that, but we must be sure that we have the risk management tools. They have to be interoperable. So it would be safe to have projects from different sectors in Ukraine, so that even if there is some sector that is, has demonstrated to be maybe not that environmentally aligned because issues with either a project or the entire methodology, you still have the other project as a safeguard in terms of buffer pools and other methods. So we need really to have a view. We need to integrate different sectors of Ukrainian, in general, the Ukrainian economy. We have the lack compared to other countries that, Ukraine is big and there's a lot of people living there. So the economy is quite diversified. So we have the possibility of implementing different projects, and that should be done. This is also the reason why ideally we don't expect the government to provide rules for specific sectors. We want a very strong framework that is net zero aligned. It's aligned with UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, but at the same time, as Article 6 did in the negotiator rooms, it doesn't provide a sectoral view or only focuses on one industry or one tech, because otherwise you have this risk of putting all the eggs in one basket. And, if you get a failure in one of the projects or one in the sectors, you're basically ruining the entire national market of credit. So there is a lot of attention to be paid also to that one as well. I'll stop here and thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to go to Evgenia. The framework publishes one of the most detailed Article 6 governance pathways created by an emerging economy. What institutional and legal reforms are most urgent for Ukraine's Article 6 participation, authorization systems, corresponding adjustments, transparency rules, and oversight?
Thank you very much for the question. And as the tradition, I'm gonna step back, right? And stepping back, I wanted to say the huge thank you to the fantastic co-authors over here, and with the vision that you have embedded in the principles that you published before, it wouldn't be that possible to produce this policy brief for Ukrainian ministers that fast. And I'm super privileged to be affiliated with the Oxford Net Zero and to benefit from being surrounded by the best scientists, scholars, and practitioners from all the world. And thank you, of course, for making it here today, because Oxford Net Zero usually has a fantastically busy schedule across COPs, and I know that it's quite of the challenge to get and be sitting here with us. And thank you, Daisy, for the fantastic moderation. It's not that I want to finish, no. It's me being the introduction, and kudos to everyone, because this is why it is important. Because the operationalization of the framework of Article 6 and the carbon markets of Ukraine is in a huge amount. And the point is that those conversations we were having with the Ukrainian ministers, and as you know, Ukraine has been going through pretty challenging times, including the rearrangement of the institutions. And recently we have the reformed Ministry of Environment transition into the Ministry of Economy, Agriculture and Environment. So it's quite always the challenge when the country is with the war-related crisis, and at the same time having to keep in mind that we are on the path to the EU accession, that we are on the same market, that we have to get prepared for CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism. And we're doing this all at once. So it's quite of the challenge. And very much the point which I wanted to highlight, that Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery, it's not the matter of the future, and it's not something that we're gonna plan. This is what is happening. So while we're talking here now, on different discussions, the war is happening, the war is going on, the communities are being affected, the bombs are falling, but at the same time, we are preparing, we're introducing one of the most incredible efforts to foresee that recovery is possible even when there is no peace. And I think this is what Kaya mentioned in the beginning, that it could blueprint. And when we're talking about all of the legal and institutional frameworks possible to be implemented in Ukraine, we have to keep in mind that we are operating on a very low capacity, institutional capacity, but we are producing 200% of what we could have made. And having these discussions with the representatives of the ministry, and I would take long to say that I know how to do it. I think that it's nobody else can know better than the Ukrainian government. And we have the representatives here. And unfortunately, the deputy minister had to run for the bilateral meeting, but he was like as well really much looking forward to taking part in this discussion, because this is the demand that is created currently by the people in Ukraine, with the people across different sectors and societies. But what is fascinating is that with such a low capacity, it is urgent and people do understand and acknowledge. But again, it's always not enough. So something that I would definitely love to have and to transform this policy brief is educating people in Ukraine and beyond that having the carbon market operating under extreme conditions is possible, and the education matters the most. So we really need to make people believe that the carbon markets in such circumstances is not something that can delay the climate action. And this is like very much, Kaya, thank you very much for one of the comments when we were having this discussion. We shouldn't have fallen to the credibility trap, because there is always a temptation to delay, and there is always a temptation to postpone. No, carbon markets should enable reconstruction and recovery. And this is what we have already in place. And I hope that it would be supported by the international partners, by businesses, and like with the huge respect to what Ukraine really needs.
Thank you. Where do you see the strongest opportunities for bilateral Article 6.2 cooperation in the next 5 years?
I'm very privileged to be living in the UK for the previous almost 3 years. UK, definitely. And we have been working on with representatives from the UK government how we can leverage Article 6. And we are very much dreaming about having the first, like the memorandum of agreement at least, because like we know that it's kind of tricky political thing. But I think that the perspective, of course, we should leverage the existing ones, like with Switzerland and with Japan. We have to make it work. But well, the dream of mine, what would be keeping me awake at night, it's just like having UK like there, because I think that under 100-year partnership and with all of the fantastic expertise that UK has, like all across the different institutions, academia, businesses, I think it's the best way like for the carbon markets in Ukraine to be supported.
Thank you. And thank you all for your introductory remarks. Very interesting to hear your expert perspective and also the Ukrainian perspective and the private sector as well. So I'm going to ask you all a question now. If you could try and answer in a couple of sentences, if that's okay. So the question is, if we look ahead to 2030, what single indicator would show that Ukraine's carbon market is functioning with high integrity and contributing meaningfully to decarbonization and Ukraine's green recovery? Okay, yeah. Shall we start with you, Kaya?
Daisy, this is not going to be 2 sentences. I'm so sorry.
It has to be. No, I'm joking.
So I wanted to tell a personal story. I also live in the UK, which has an amazing program called Homes for Ukraine. And I signed up to it. And when I got connected with a woman to come live in my home, she was living across the border in Poland because she's an agronomist, but at the time, it wasn't safe for her to do her work across the border. And she was living in conditions where she was joking, like Ukrainian humor. She's like, haha, I think conditions here are like slave labor. And I was like, oh, that's not funny. Where's your passport and how soon can you come? And I tell this story, she's like my best friend now. She tells me when my outfits are not cute. She like comes over and helps me pack for COP, and she's safe and well. But my indicator for the future for Ukraine and the success of carbon markets is that she can go home and she can do her work as an agronomist. And also we have a lot of arguments about regenerative farming. So my hope is that Ukraine farm, she's like the most stubborn person I've ever met. If we can convince her that regenerative farming is a viable model in Ukraine, then we will have won with the carbon markets, but maybe I'll bring her to the next COP.
Mine is a little bit more boring, but again, part of the brief, we wanted to not only conceptualize carbon markets today, but also that pathway to EU accession. So I'd say very clearly that the signal and the indicator for 2030 would be the ability to plug into the EU ETS with no problems. And again, that integrity foundation that's possible to start building today can make that a seamless transition. Thanks.
Yeah, my indicator, I guess, will be, pullable from the registries, will be up and running. So we'll be clearly able to just access a web page and see how it is going. So keep it short.
So I would say, the full implementation of carbon markets with Ukraine. but probably earlier than 2030. 5 years ago, we did it with, we started with 12 countries, and we managed to get 2 countries across the line. The learning curve is going to be very, very steep, but I think it's possible to implement, carbon markets and Article 6 with Ukraine quite fast. And with regards to the EU, as you probably know, the EU had a big announcement last week, probably the biggest one with regards to the carbon markets, that they will only allow Article 6 credits into the EU. So I think it's in Ukraine's best interest to work on that track, because by 2030, these will be the first pilot phases of this Article 6 market for the EU. And next year, we plan to do a big summit in London called the Green Recovery Summit. So I invite you all to come. We don't have a date yet, and we don't have a venue, but we're figuring this out. And hopefully we can mobilize the first liquidity to build the capacity and start this national recovery plan for Ukraine. So yeah, if we could provide, the first 100 million or billion to this recovery plan, that would be great. And I'm already starting to talk to several big banks, and we will be carrying these talks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I'm going to be organizing a meeting with some CEOs of big banks from Asia and from Europe and from the US. Just one last point. Cambodia was when I was at the peace treaty, and I was very small in 1991. And back then, there was a recovery for Cambodia, but it wasn't a green one, unfortunately. So, but a lot of banks and a lot of countries came to the table, including Japan, Singapore, Korea, US, and Europe to the table. And I think very similarly, we can do the same. I know that we don't have a peace treaty yet for Ukraine, but we can still bring those countries and these governments to the table to make sure that they understand that Ukraine has the intention to recover and reconstruct their whole economy and their whole infrastructure in a sustainable and green way. So it is possible. Look at Cambodia now. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, double-digit GDP numbers, faster than China and a lot of countries throughout the world. So I'm just hoping for the same for my fatherland. Thank you.
It's such a challenge to speak up to you all. And I was thinking that maybe it would be 3 words. So 2030, right? So European, prosperous, and peaceful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. So we do have some time now for audience questions. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question? Yes. Would you like to take my microphone? Might be easiest.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Dmytro Tuchuk. I'm Director of National Center of GSG Mission of Ukraine. And first of all, I would like to thank you for this very important panel discussion. And Ukraine currently preparing a regulation document about Article 6 Paris Agreement. And during the preparation, we had many questions. And the most important of all, it's the first. It's interaction Article 6 Paris Agreement with the carbon tax. And second, it is interaction Article 6 Paris Agreement with emission trading system. It's very important for our country because we have not answer for this question. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So we actually just had this conversation, and of course, there's still a lot of open questions. Well, I think we need, the old way, just get the text and try to do some writing and check what actually works and what doesn't. So there's need to be a team, a working group under the ministry maybe, with a clear roadmap, unpacked by topics eventually on, on the different points, trying to collect the inputs from relevant stakeholders, so they can be different depending on the questions and the topics, in order to provide a guideline. I mean, there is a lot going on. Yevgenia just mentioned, you have the CBAM, the ETS, the Article 6, the VCMs, and so there's a lot boiling, there. So we really need to unpack it and like go step by step, understanding what we actually want, and also politically what we want. So I think that the technical people like Oxford and other stakeholders, they can answer to the different options that are there on the table, but then the final answer in terms of which mechanism Ukraine wants to use has to come from the politicians. So of course I don't have an answer like specifically now on how the ETS will be integrated with Article 6, but yeah, our session was very interesting, and I hope we can bring it further.
Yeah, thank you for this, and it's something. Obviously, with the policy briefing, we only had a number of weeks to kind of pull this together, but we very much see this as the start of a, in continuance of a collaboration, and so yeah, that's the first thing to say. But really, I think. As we started to sketch out in the brief in terms of this, just like the relationship between voluntary compliance and then Article 6 is one that's really important to get right, especially when we think of the EU, because we know in the EU ETS there's been a very clear signal that they don't want to integrate, clean development mechanism style units again. At the same time, we know with the CBAM, there's different responses. And in fact, we've worked collaboratively with my colleague here, Cindy, with the Western Balkan governments about kind of responses there. And again, what's one of the really cool things about CBAM operationalization is it helps kind of really give the incentive to develop these schemes domestically and to ensure that revenue and projects are being developed domestically rather than, foregoing that revenue over to the CBAM. So it's a space of lots of opportunity, but what I think is really critical is to give that signal for that long-term, the integrity details that will make fungibility a lot easier down the line. And we can also even look to where the ETS themselves within the EU and UK are also innovating, for instance, in regards to removal integration, because I think if all these facets are considered right from the outset, that's the way to build a really resilient framework in the long term, but also distinguishing and not putting all the kind of eggs in the carbon market basket. What I think is also really cool, a new opportunity that hasn't been so unpacked, is also the role of the adaptation fund. And, we know with the 6.4 transactions, 5% of that revenue will go to the adaptation fund. So there's also collaborative work there to, for instance, especially help fund nature-based conservation efforts and whatnot, in a much more efficient manner than perhaps the carbon market can, because when you have to spend all the money on MRV and everything, that means less money to the ground for some of these projects. So it's about also really understanding and unlocking the full potential of different project types. And we list a few in the briefing, but for instance, even biochar also has potential kind of to detoxify soils and whatnot, but it also would enable Ukraine to plug into those high value markets, and again better integrate into the EU ETS and eventually the kind of European wide ETS, including the UK as well in future. But yeah, just to start. Kaya?
I think that the main questions that you're asking are being asked by a lot of countries right now. And I think just to add one more layer of complexity within companies, they're also setting internal carbon prices. And so then do they set an internal carbon price to be in the lead ahead of perhaps a government-based carbon price? Or do they set that sort of as a way for them to prepare? What I advise companies is that you should be setting an internal carbon price, at least for your scope 1 and 2 emissions, and at a level that starts to ramp up towards what we expect from government carbon prices. And going one step further than that, how does the government set the carbon price in line with the science of net zero? with an increasing ratchet of the quality and durability of the credits you might buy if you're using the carbon price for credits. And so I guess this doesn't help make your answer simpler, it makes it longer, but we need to be in dialogue between governments and companies about preparing our companies for developing products in a way that costs in those negative externalities. And they're really unprepared. It's a favor to them, requiring them to have a carbon price. It's also a favor to them to let them know that the voluntary system is suggesting this, because that will prepare their, entire operations for what's to come, and create a more resilient economy that doesn't have a sudden whiplash or backlash or see companies go out of business, which is the last thing we want in a place that needs to develop, not develop less.
My suggestion is that, next week or in 2 weeks, I'm going to Azerbaijan. So the government of Azerbaijan has asked me to come to give almost a 1-week workshop, a 3-day workshop on building the carbon markets in Azerbaijan. So I would suggest to do the same in Ukraine and invite, experts. This workshop in Azerbaijan, and I can send you, the outline of what we're covering, but it covers all the elements of the carbon markets and the infrastructure and implementing Article 6 and you name it, national registries, et cetera, et cetera. This is organized by the Central Bank of Azerbaijan, all the banks in Azerbaijan, the central government, and a lot of companies, so the big emitters in Azerbaijan. So if we can do the same in Kiev, I'm all up for it. I'll come, and we can ask for some money from maybe the UK, from the FCDO, because they actually are working in conjunction on that program, and of course the City of London. The whole point in this is because people still don't understand how much money you can make from this. And fortunately enough, there are people like me and people within the City of London that understand that. So they're prepared to provide a bit of money for building the education and knowledge sharing and the capacity building right now, because Article 6 is alive and kicking. And I think we should do exactly that, sometime, next year. And I'm happy to share the results if the FCDO allows me to do so with you guys. I think I'm under a Secrecy Act at the moment, so I can't divulge much, but I'm happy to share this information so that we can use and replicate that for Ukraine.
Thank you very much, everyone. Do we have any more questions in the room? If not, I can ask a question. So, it's you. The panelists here have really eloquently laid out the potential for this kind of framework to have benefits for Ukrainian communities and the green recovery. I think also from the perspective of a climate journalist, a lot of the coverage and of what we've seen of carbon markets has been negative. So I guess a question would be, do you think that coverage and that kind of analysis of carbon markets has been fair, first of all, which may be a bit of a spicy question? And don't worry about me, don't hold back. And also, are there any kind of genuine lessons to learn as Ukraine takes a step forward? Kaya, would you be happy to start on that?
Yeah. So I think what's so hard about journalism, of course, and I know Carbon Brief is one of the best on this. You guys do such detailed and nuanced analysis. And, other mediums just simply do not have a format to go beyond 500 or 400 words sometimes. And there is no way to capture the picture of the carbon market in 500 or 400 words. And so but as a challenge of communication, we end up with people reading headlines or 400-word articles and getting a single monolith picture. I think that the question that we should be asking as experts is, how do we learn from the case studies or anecdotes of harm that we see, and how do we learn from the large N analysis, the large numerical analysis? carbon markets all across them, there are gorgeous examples of projects that we want to exist. Projects that help people, projects that restore nature, projects that bring the energy transition that we need. And the majority of the carbon market is overcredited because the financial system is not built in a way that helps an invisible commodity be easily, tracked, and because a lot of the methods are based on counterfactuals that are very hard to determine. And so what we argue is we need the carbon markets, but use them with caution. And that's what we've put into this briefing. If you expect that there's probably going to be some overcrediting because that's kind of in the nature of the game, then don't overclaim and put money into something knowing that you're not going to pay for something in the same unit analysis that you're used to, but you are directing money in the right direction. And how do you know you're directing money in the right direction? If people are working with people with due diligence on the ground, if you can see and feel the impacts of the projects. I'll go back to my friend Galina. She was living in a high risk situation. She was in a vulnerable situation. They were going to take money because they needed to eat. And that is rife for a situation where someone who wants to make money will facilitate human rights abuses. And we see that some of the companies that Michael mentioned are caught up in some problems right now where unfortunately some of those things have happened. And that's because when you're trying to do system change at a high level, which those companies probably did because they are well-meaning. Thank you. They're well-meaning, these companies, and they care about the climate, but they're trying to do such big levels of transactions. You have to do a lot of due diligence and you miss some things. So I think that we need to just keep learning, keep investing, but that due diligence is so critical because if we lose sight of the people who we're trying to help in this process, we lose everything. And I guess that's not a satisfying response. It's not a yes or a no. We must use the carbon markets as one tool of many. We must be using the carbon markets in conjunction with our amazing government leaders, and we cannot afford to lose track of the people in the carbon markets.
Can I say something? Yeah. So I cannot speak on behalf of the VCM bashing that has happened over the last 2 years because I'm not involved in VCM. But with regards to Article 6, I can already see some misinformation being spread even by the media. And I've had arguments with the FT and so forth. So I'm just going to lay out just 3 fundamentals on Article 6. Fundamental number 1 is that Article 6 is not just government to government. It's government to private sector as well and to investors. For some reason, everybody thinks it's just government to government. Fundamental number 2 is that you do not need a corresponding adjustment if you wanted to buy a Article 6 credit. The corresponding adjustment is done by the host country. You don't need another country to do the corresponding adjustment. And then fundamental number 3 is that the announcement made by the EU, and somebody reported in the FT, and maybe it was you as well, claimed that EU is only accepting 6.4, which is totally, totally false. The EU accepts any Article 6 credits. In fact, I spoke to the EU negotiator 2 days ago, face to face, and she said this is complete misinformation. So my point is that let's educate maybe the media on the fundamentals of Article 6 first, so that we don't spread this misinformation and so that we can unlock all this capital. And with regards to the safeguards and the benefits for the people and so forth, Article 6 has nothing to do with the VCM. This is not about reviewing a PDD. So you're not reviewing one document as part of Article 6. You're reviewing more than 80 documents, both at the national level, at the international level on the UNFCCC, and at the product level. So what products you actually emit as part of the Article 6. Why am I saying this? Because Deutsche Bank and all these companies that have embarked on this Article 6 journey took 10 months to do the due diligence. 10 months. Okay, this is not the due diligence of one PDD. This requires the legal counsel, third-party experts to review all the documentation in the data room. So why am I saying this as well? It's because this provides, the integrity and the information that you need to make sure that the country does the right thing and to make sure that the money goes to the right sectors to the right people, et cetera. So let's focus on, informing the public, the rest of the stakeholders here in the right way on Article 6, get some fundamentals right, then we can discuss other things such as use of proceeds, such as safeguards, et cetera. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back on that, I mean, there's a good reason why parties think it's party to party, because we know last year there was it was a proposition at Bonn to have a definition of a cooperative approach as being between two parties. So this has been an understanding of quite some parties for quite some time. So that's why, it is right that a lot of people have been interpreting it that way, and why, Evgenia, you mentioned memorandums of understanding between governments as being a foundation for 6.2. So that's to counter, that part. Obviously, there's other interpretations. Sorry, what?
You cannot cross-talk with the microphone.
I can't hear. But that's why, there's a proposal to have a definition of a cooperative approach last year between two parties, capital P, two countries. That was last year in Bonn. And there's really fundamental reasons for that, because it's, in effect, it opens up emissions trading. We can come later, but I can send you the document if you want. What do you?
But do you understand that Article 6 and Article 6.2 is also from government to private sector and investors, or not?
I understand that some interpretations have been that way in the market, but that doesn't stop the fact that it was a proposal last year at Bonn that it was only between two parties, capital P parties. So that's why, and coming back to the broader question about media, I mean, the media stories that we've seen about the voluntary carbon market have been based on academic analysis that's been published in Science and Nature. Indeed, last year here at COP, we had the largest systematic review of credits that found that 86% of credits out of nearly 1 billion had no atmospheric impact. This is really important because we know that carbon markets are not about making money, they're about making mitigation. Unless we get that fundamental right, it's a non-starter. And so that is why it's really critical that we continue to have the strong relationship building and understanding. And that's where I agree with Michael that we need to have the facts. We need to know what's going on in the rooms, about the history of the negotiations. And that's where we're also very happy to announce this week that we are launching an Article 6 observatory to help understand and bring together that academic analysis, because it's really important we get it right. And that's why we're working with partners in the Ukrainian government, but others, and have been for several years to ensure that this kind of information is relayed. And so, I think the media have been very responsible, because it's irresponsible for us to get it right. We know carbon markets have got it wrong in the past. We have an opportunity to get it right, but it requires truth-telling, it requires evidence. And and that's why there really is a role for all the ecosystem actors, media, academia, the private sector and whatnot, to come together, but on the fundamentals of, evidence. Yeah.
Well, I think that has been, extensively covered, so I have nothing to add, but I appreciate that there are different positions and views, so it makes more, it makes it more interesting, so thank you.
I agree.
And just like a quick comment, I adore when discussions sparkle. And in the process of these discussions, we do understand, and again, here we'll be echoing what we started with. Carbon markets for Ukraine, it is for Ukraine and for people.
Yes.
Reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine is to make Ukraine safer, recover. We do create the business opportunities for the international partners, and this is fantastic once we can leverage it for that. But when we are dealing with markets, it's not about the money. It should be about the people of Ukraine there on the front lines who would be coming back home, who would expect to contribute to the rebuilding of the country. And this fight that they were carrying out, it's not to create the business case for the international companies to come and to invest. It's first and foremost, they want to have the prosperous country that stays within its borders, has its national identity, agency, and being the full member, strong member of the global community. This is what this carbon market can be as an enabler, as an instrument. This is for people. And maybe if we see it and take Ukraine as a case study, because we are building our current systems actually from the scratch, if we see it and maybe this would sparkle the minds of people who are just trading for the sake of trading, think why this all was initially created. It is for mitigation.
Such great points, and you speak so beautifully. I was talking to a really high integrity project developer here in Brazil, and he described carbon markets as a fire starter. It's like a Kickstarter, because his economic model for the work that he's doing, planting trees on smallholder farms so that people can hold on to their land, is an economic model that does not depend solely on the carbon market, but the carbon market injects that bit of cash that they need to hold on to their land now and do that restoration work. And I think if we think about it in that way, then we can see Eugene's vision of a long-term self-sufficient Ukraine.
Thank you, everyone. And yeah, thank you. I mean, we can all feel your passion and determination when you speak about Ukraine and bringing benefits to people. And yeah, on Article 6, I think I was reminded yesterday we had a webinar at Carbon Brief with Simon Evans, who is Article 6 for us, and he was saying that he describes us as a big Article 6 geek, but he has to go to bigger Article 6 geeks to figure out what's happened like more recently, because it's just very complicated and hard, even for judges that have, and observers that are following this so closely. So do we have any more questions or comments in the audience? Or is there any other questions that you may want to ask each other, or comments you might like to raise at this time?
Read the report.
Okay. Well, I think then what I will do is I'm getting so many live updates around negotiations. Is what it's saying for all of you. I got over my phone. But yeah, if you could just kind of maybe each give a brief takeaway message from your, maybe like a reflection from this session today, or something you'd like people to take away, and then we can probably wrap up from there. So, Evgenia, do you want to start?
Thankful, God.
We can speak at the same time. No, look, let's do it. In Article 6, we did it with many countries in the last 5 years. Let's do it for Ukraine and bring. You need money, Gina, to help the people of Ukraine. So, and I want to help the people of Ukraine with the right money. And if we implement it the right way with the government and the central bank and other partners, I think we'll be able to attract the right money into Ukraine that will go directly to the people and to the nature of Ukraine. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll end on a note of courage, following the gratitude and following the desire to just do it. We cannot avoid, at this stage in the climate crisis, we cannot avoid high risk zones when we do good governance work. That's where we learn the most. That's where, if you want to get someone really excited about something, throw them in the deep end. High risk, high reward. I see Ukraine in 2030 in this vision that's been described today. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting, that Ukraine's embarking on this vision, and they're really, this is a case that there can be a win for climate, for the people, and yeah, I think we've got all the foundations for that here. So thank you very much for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So I think as well that we, should start working. I hope that today it's just, the beginning of potentially some potential work on this Article 6 together with the government and the businesses, Ukrainian civil society. So I really hope we can come back to COP31, wherever it will be, and say we have in Ukraine a functioning framework, or at least an understanding of a framework where we can show on some slides the different mechanisms and how they integrate. That's what we need to do, and I hopefully look forward.
And actually, one point, when we're talking about Article 6, we cannot, of course, forget the amazing contributions Ukraine has made on the part of Olga, who's been chair of the supervisory body. Ukraine has been very active in the negotiations. And so really recognizing, Ukraine's leadership is not just domestic, it is international. So just wanted to.
Thank you. And I learned a lot from Olga, so I'm thankful as well. Yeah.
Where is Olga?
Olga has
not here?
there. No, she's not here, but she's here with us, in the
Good.
text. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And that's the end of today's event. And wish you would all please thank our amazing panelists.
Yes, let's take a photo.
With some of these, those little things.
Oh yeah. Well, we can go. Thank you so much for supporting this work and demonstrating leadership. It's amazing. And then we